What's up, Dragon Brood? It's time for some more hot takes. And these come from y'all on Twitter. But this time, I decided to bring somebody else to handle these hot takes with me. So I got Dev over from Strictly Better MTG. How's it going, dude?
Hey, man, too hot to handle some of these takes, man. It's going pretty good. I have had a crazy week, and I am on very little sleep right now, so I think I'm in the exact perfect headspace to do this video with you right now. So
This would be great. You know what? By the way, I need to let you know. Somebody pointed out the most amazing name for us as a duo since we are a black dude and a white dude and we like wrestling.
yeah.
The Nerdly Boys.
I can be Bubba Ray. I've always wanted to be Bubba Ray.
Isn't that awesome? I'm like, man,
Yeah.
good on them. I can't remember who it was. I'd love to give credit to the person. I forgot who it was, but I saw that and went, if we ever do the wrestling show, that's the perfect name.
Yeah, I can tell you to get the tables. Get the tables.
All
Yeah,
right.
you guys will one day get your wrestling podcast. It's all but a certainty at this point.
So, like I said, I put this up on Twitter. I let everybody submit their hottest takes for us. Dev really hasn't seen these. I picked like the top 12, I think, that were on there. That we're
I've
going
tried
cover.
to stay away from these as much as possible. I don't know what's coming.
And I really haven't thought a lot about these other than I went, okay, that's a good one to discuss. And that's about as far as I went before I clipped them. So we're going to get into the first one here. And this comes from Patrick Gavinod. Says, way too many people got way too upset about Farewell. For years, it was white as a joke and Wizards listened. And now white gets a bunch of good cards and people lose their brains. You've seen the blue cards, right? I mean, yeah, there are some annoying blue cards, but let's be real. Like we talked about this on our last video we did together, that Farewell just does too much for the cost.
It's ridiculous.
The problem with Farewell isn't even what it does, is that you get all of that for one cost and it exiles everything.
Yep. It's one card. You know what I mean? Like all of this planning, all of these multiple resources that represent like 7 or 8 of the cards in your hand that you've drawn that turn and the resources you've used to draw those cards, all dust in one card. And it costs a lot to play the card, right? But I'm not even just talking about standard. Like, I don't think Farewell ruined standard at any point during its life cycle, but it is a really annoying card to come across. Like I said in our last video, I'm actually way more apologetic towards the commander players that have to deal with Farewell until the end of time. Because, you know, standard is already, you worry in standard that somebody will Farewell and just wipe all of your work. But in commander, you do so much more work. And you have so many more like different permanent types that you're working with to get to like your kooky idea going. And just like the fact that somebody can take all of your like well-intentioned jank and wipe it off the table with one stupid card, it is aggravating.
You know what? I think the way I would put it is there's no decisions to be made with the card, right? It's not still.
Yeah.
There's no managing the game state or whatever. It's literally just, all right, everything's
point
gone.
And click. Yep.
Yeah. Whereas most other cards like that, you have to choose 1 or 2 modes, or you can do this extra thing if you pay this extra mana or sack a creature or whatever, right? There's some other thing going on with it. Like, this isn't strategic in any way. It's literally just, all right, everything's gone.
Blank your stuff. You can't even, if you had some sort of auxiliary plan to get it out of the graveyard, then screw that too. You can't do that. You know, Farewell often turns off contingency plans too. Like, you know, if someone hits me with the sweep, I have plans, but like, no, you don't. No, you don't. It's like, I'm not really coming at it from an aggro player's perspective. I'm not saying I just hate all sweepers, you know. I feel like Farewell, once you get to the point in the game where they can pull the trigger on it, you know, it really doesn't matter what kind of deck you're playing. It's going to interact with you in like a really negative way. Even if you're control sometimes, like wiping your graveyard or wiping, you know, all your tokens or whatever is going to be a problem. And I'm not saying that like cards that make me feel bad shouldn't exist. You know what I mean? Like I'm not trying to be that guy.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm with you.
This card is a bridge too far.
But they should have some level of depth or strategy or something to it, even though they're that big. And this card lacks all of that.
It's like the last thing I want to address about this take is the thing that was sandwiched in the middle there about like how white was a joke forever and now it gets good cards and everyone loses their mind. That seems subjective to me. That hasn't really been my experience. White has been I started playing in 1995 when White had Wrath of God and Armageddon and Swords to Plowshares. White has been a fairly strong color for most of Magic's history. And I'll just finish with this. This is why everything is a matter of perspective.
But I will say this, though. This rolls into our second hot take. coincidentally,
Here we go.
from Hex MTG, which I think is actually another content creator.
It is. Yeah, I know
Yeah,
Hex.
too much exile was the actual tweet. And honestly, I agree. I think there's
Yeah.
way too much. Because again, we turn off all the stuff that's like, what's the point of having a thing that has like hex proof or whatever if it's just going to get exiled anyway, right?
Yeah,
Like,
a
or
death
trying,
trigger.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Trying to have stuff that goes to the graveyard, or when this thing dies, you get whatever. Now, if a bunch of cards are worded as when it leaves play, cool. But we're still wording a bunch of stuff as like when it dies.
Dies.
So now you have cards that are really sweet that you don't even play part of the time because a bit hell, especially let's say you're playing against something like the domain control decks, right? Well, they're going to be playing ley lines with
Leyline.
exile. They're playing
Sunfall. Yep.
sunfall which exiles. So it's like half the time your creatures aren't going to do anything. So it's like what's the point in playing a lot of them?
Yep, it's they printed all these like awesome Kamigawa dragons with the dice triggers, and they're awesome. They see like no play outside of like the occasional it's sushi on arena or whatever. But like aside from that, like they printed LSL Core, a kind of like blood artist, They printed a bunch of stuff with these incredible death triggers, but like I'm not gonna say nothing ever dies. Like Go for the Throat is a magic card,
Yeah,
but
of
like
course.
White right now in standard has Leyline of Binding and March of Otherworldly Light and Sunfall and Farewell and the Wandering Emperor. Like at the moment, there just is too much exile. There just is.
Oh well, not let's not give black a free pass either because there's a bunch of stuff exiling stuff from graveyards. So graveyards are basically non-existent
Yeah,
for a
graveyard's
lot of
kind of
games for a lot of
useless.
strategies. Right? Unless you're doing, I think the only real graveyard based thing in standard right now is the Azorius combo with like the Rakdos joins up and
Yeah,
whatever.
the infinite
Yeah, and they're
hulking
trying to do it
metamorph.
like right then, and that's kind of
Yeah.
it, right?
You got to do it that turn. Like some of those decks have
Yeah,
added Grand Abolisher so that like you do it that turn and they cannot
yeah,
interact with it.
exactly.
Yeah, but even then you usually have to wait till like turn 6 and there's just so much graveyard interaction, especially game 2 when they bring in Hearse. Like every deck brings in unlicensed Hearse.
But even then, you have the black card that like exile a thing and gets rid of all copies. Like that's a thing you still see
Yeah,
pop
Deadly
up.
Cover Up.
Yeah, like
I've been starting to see Deadly Cover Up pop in and like or pop up in like domain lists
oh, it's
instead
everywhere.
of Sunfall. It is a simple card. It is a simple card, but it's a powerful card that you want to play in your deck. And again, you have to not only work for it, but like a little bit of your deck building has to facilitate it. And so it's kind of decision based. There's going to be times where you're like, well, do I really want to exile this card from my yard? Right? Like, do I want to exile this card from my yard to collect evidence for this?
But
To
also,
get rid of that. So again, decision based, and that's better than just like exile that thing.
exactly, separate from farewell, it's still just destroying everything. So and it's only getting one thing.
Right.
Right. And that's one thing at a cost to you. Now, a small cost, but still a cost. Yeah. I'm not even sure that's a
Agreed.
hugely hot take, but
Yeah.
it's one
And
I agree
honestly,
with.
for what it's worth, it'll be a little better after rotation where we lose March and we don't lose Leyline, but we might lose Domain, kind of.
Sure.
And then we lose like Wandering Emperor. So like hopefully things calm down on that front soon.
All right. Next one comes from X's Sniper, and it is more people playing a game is rarely better for the average player and is mostly just to improve publishers' bottom line since development resources almost never scale appropriately or proportionately to profit increases. It mostly just results in marketing toward the lowest common denominator. I could not disagree with this one more.
With me either, man.
Literally from the first line, more people playing a game is rarely better for the average player. I can't agree. Can't
Yeah.
agree. And I can tell you lots of reasons. First, you don't get local game stores if there aren't more players to go shop at those stores.
Yeah.
Right? Like
Just
it's
on the ground level. Exactly.
yeah, literally
Yeah.
at the bottommost level, you don't get more places to play if there aren't more people. Period. Like it's just it is what it is. Right? You don't get conventions for things if there aren't more people because you can't just put a thing in Chicago and have people go to it unless there's hundreds of thousands of people that
Yeah.
want to go to Chicago or
It
whatever,
has to be
right?
profitable for the people putting on the event,
Yeah,
So
like and this is for every game, not even just Magic.
yeah,
Like
yeah, I know. Yeah, you're extrapolating and you're absolutely right. Yeah.
yeah, I don't think any like you have to have more players. Like now, does that put more money in the pockets of the people at the top? Absolutely.
Coincidentally,
Yeah,
yes.
like 100% agree with that part. Are they
You know
going
what
to
I like though? You know what I
Yeah,
like
yeah.
though, Quan, is when the game that I play for my entire life actually isn't successful and doesn't make any money, and so they actually die and go
Yeah,
bankrupt.
exactly.
That's what
Like
I like. is when nobody actually buys the game that I enjoy, so it ends.
Yeah,
That's what
I'm
I
with
like.
you, right? Because I had that same thought of like, okay, well then if you just don't get more players, what happens?
Right.
Eventually those other players age out or something or get new hobbies or whatever
Yeah.
it is.
It's like a serving job at a restaurant. There is turnover in this game. Like,
Yeah.
there's always going to be people ducking out and coming back in a few years later or whatever. Like there's always going to be dips and valleys in sort of people's lifetime ability to play this game, even because people have kids or, they go to school or whatever. They start a new job, and sometimes people just can't play even if they want to.
But you know what
So you
though?
have to bring in new people.
I think even beyond that, like your cards can't be traded or sold or whatever if there aren't more players, right? There's been infinite games over the years that have come out, but they don't have a big following. So the cards have never been worth anything.
Yeah.
So you buy the cardboard that's, worth a couple of dollars at best because there's no market, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't really, I mean, I get it. I get this is being mad that companies don't spend proportionately down the line of the money they're making. Like
Yeah, again, it's
I
sandwiched
agree
in
with
there.
that part as a concept of
Yeah,
capitalism.
right. Right, just period, right. All
Yeah.
companies do this, we don't spend as much on R&D as we do on marketing, and that's how it's gonna be. Again, sandwiched in between there, I think is a good point. I wanna give that to them. Yeah, they don't spend as much of the money that we give them on the things we want.
For
I mean,
sure.
if that's your basic point, then yeah, but that's
Yeah, like
true of
we can't say
more or
that
less
like
every multinational corporation.
of
Yeah.
every dollar they sell of product, 60% should go to XYZ. Like that's not the math that happens.
Corporate cynicism in this post, I feel, is just like slightly misguided. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
again, you do want Wizards to make money, and you do, like they said, you do want them to spend it in the right place. But what is that place? How do you want them to invest the money into the player base? You know,
Yeah, I think
and
that's a
they
whole
may have
separate
answers for that
conversation.
too. That's the thing, is that it's actually a very complicated
Yeah.
conversation once you get into the weeds of it.
Yeah, I
But
think the problem for me is
you
this
know,
fell apart with like more players playing a game is rarely better for the gamers. I
yeah, like
just
from the first
think
sentence. And honestly, I
yeah.
feel like this one is bookended with, and I'm not trying to say like anything. I don't know the person that tweeted this. I don't. But this is bookended with language I just generally don't like and feels very gatekeepy.
Yeah. Like I'm thinking about
Lowest common denominator is kind of a red flag term for me. Like, what do you mean by
sure.
that? You know?
But I'm looking at it as like there's been so many good games over the years that if you go and talk to players, like they would have loved to have had more people playing their game so they could still be playing it.
Absolutely. Let's move on from
All
that.
right. Next one up comes from Han_shot first. Great user tag.
It is great.
Magic is better as a whole when players experience more formats, even if they're not everyone's cup of tea. Understanding other perspectives improves empathy and gameplay.
This is a fantastic take to
Yeah,
me.
I'm like
Yeah.
50-50 on this one.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, like I don't think it's bad for people to play more formats, but I don't think that automatically increases the empathy for other players.
I don't.
Because like cuz
Okay.
somebody who enjoys, let's say Popper, or even let's say a weird format like I don't know, Canadian Highlander or something. They could go and play a vintage event and they're just going to get steamrolled. That doesn't change their perspective.
Oh
You
yeah,
know what
that's
I mean?
true.
Like,
That's
like
true.
they're gonna be like, yeah, all these awesome cards, and I lost on turn 3. Like, okay, cool. That doesn't really like. I've had people try to explain, no, you should play old school or whatever, and I played old school, and you know what I felt like? This is how when Magic used to suck, right? Like, don't get me wrong.
Ouch.
Hey, I played that. I grew up in it, right?
Yeah.
I
Same.
I
Same.
get why people like it though. I mean, I understand why you want to do a throwback thing where it was simpler and you just played all the big cards that your Sarah Angels and whatever. I get it, but yeah, not something I'm ever going to want to play.
That's a whole other thing. Old school Magic, and whether or not it was definitely simpler. Don't get me wrong, but the games are slower and therefore more like value based. You know what I mean? Derived like card for card advantage over your opponent in sly ways, and that's my kind of Magic. But anyway, that's not necessarily like what's on the docket here.
Mhm.
But I will say, here's my hot take, and I've actually been debating whether or not I want to say this. But my hottest take, my boilingest take, is that I actually don't, in general, as a human being, not just as a Magic player, but I don't think that human beings experiencing the same thing as other human beings necessarily makes them more empathetic. As a matter of fact, I think it often makes them less empathetic. and I'm not going to say especially Magic players, but we do see this with format specialists where, someone only plays standard or they only play modern, right? And their typical response to someone who has a complaint about the format is what? Get good, right? Quit whining, get good. A format specialist very often will not necessarily be empathetic to other people playing that format. And I understand the idea that like playing Commander and Standard and Draft and Old School and Pauper and Cube, like this gives you a well-rounded Magic experience, and
Yeah.
that's good. I think that's fine, right? But I
Yes.
don't think it necessarily increases empathy. If anything, I think somebody might be like, well, I played that format and Farewell wasn't so bad. I played that format and Voha wasn't so bad. So I think it could go either way at
Yeah,
the end of the
that's why
day.
I'm that's why I said, like, this one, I'm, like, 50% on. Like, it's a pretty good take, though. I mean, being honest,
I
like,
think at
I
its
think
at its heart,
yeah, at
you
its
know.
core, I think this is a pretty good take. I just don't know if it really works out that way most of the time. Plus,
Yeah,
you have a lot of reasons people do play certain formats, or some people only play limited because they don't have time to deck build or whatever, because they have a
yeah,
busy schedule. So they just
that's
show up,
true.
draft once a month at their local store or whatever, and that's all they do. And they're good with that, right? There's some people only play Commander because it's the only players they could find, but they kind of would like to
Yeah.
play some other formats,
It's like
right?
different people are different. Everybody has a different like schedule and like a different amount of time every week to fit Magic into that schedule. And sometimes Commander is perfect. Sometimes Arena, just
I think
sitting in your house playing Arena is perfect for people. And
I would say if we changed the part about empathy and just made
mm,
it give people a broader perspective and better understanding, I would agree with it a
which
little bit more,
is
probably.
almost a stand-in for empathy, but
Kind of,
just
kind
like
of.
I say that to say that I don't think you're being like pedantic or splitting
Yeah,
hairs.
yeah.
Those are different enough things that I think you could make that sort of causal distinction or that
Good take though.
causal distinction.
I
Yeah,
do like
I
that.
think it,
That's
it it really gives people a lot of sort of it is a take that has hope for humanity, and I
exactly.
and
Exactly.
I'm
Maybe
into
that's
those.
actually it. Maybe you did hit on something there. Maybe I've seen people in the gaming, and not just in Magic, just in the gaming communities over 20 plus years now, that like I kind of maybe a little cynical on it to be like, I get it. That's what I'm saying. It's a
Mhm.
good take. I just don't know if it plays out that way.
Yeah.
All right, next one up. We have MTG Standoff says Infect is viewed as too scary, even though it almost is never a winner. This doesn't include cards like Triumph of the Hordes, where you just win when you attack.
This doesn't include cards that are actually good with
Yeah,
Infect.
exactly.
This doesn't include cards that disprove the point I'm making.
I think
They're
that
right. I kind of think they're a little bit right though. I'm not trying to make too much fun.
though, I think I get where people are scared of Infect because, again, this comes back to a lot of interaction goes away, right? It's, oh, they make this unblockable thing and then they put this thing on it and then it dealt this much damage and you're dead. And it's just like, well, all right, I didn't really get to do anything,
I didn't
right?
get to play Magic. Yeah.
Yeah, especially if you're playing something like Boggles with Infect or whatever with like unblockable guys and you're putting extra things on them, that sort of thing. Or as you've seen even in standard, there's been times just like, oh, they got their 1/2 whatever that you target.
Venerated Rod Priest.
Yeah, the Rot Priest.
I do not understand why they printed that card the way they printed that card.
Yeah, and my problem
I
is that's a situation where again, almost no interaction is
Yeah.
beneficial, right? Unless you just
That was
sweep the board or something or whatever.
that's always been people's number one problem with Infect is that it feels like you can't really interact with it and you're not playing Magic. And so they printed Venerated Rod Priest, the card that's hard to interact with, and makes you feel like you're not actually playing Magic. And if you do try to interact with it, screw you, actually. It's
Yeah,
like,
take an
I
extra
really,
point in Infect just because.
they took all the people, like all the things that people complained about with Infect and like put it on one card, but they didn't make Infect toxic, really. A very good mechanic. But that said, Bant Toxic still wins tournaments every now and again, just out of nowhere.
Yeah, and I will say Toxic at least is a little better than Infect because
Toxic is
it's the
much,
one poison versus
yeah,
poison equal to the power, right?
right. Toxic is much, much safer. The thing I'll say about Infect is that it's always been like since its inception, Infect has been a glass cannon.
Mhm.
Like, yeah, it's hard to interact with, but certain decks have the exact right interactive pieces. It's much easier to interact with Infect now than it ever has been. Especially since we didn't have pieces like temporary lockdown 10 years ago. Like
Yeah.
when Glistener Elf was 4 power on turn 2 every
Yeah, no
game,
joke.
we didn't have that. So the game has changed a little bit. And I don't think Infect is quite as scary in its base form as it used to be, but I definitely get why people were aggravated with Infect. So like this is one
Yeah.
of those like 50-50 takes for me too.
Yeah. I'm like, I'm
But
not gonna say this is a hot take. This is more just like assessing the feel of the community. Like a lot of people are afraid of Infect and don't like playing against it. Like, you're not wrong.
you're not
Like,
wrong.
yeah, they have a lot of reasons
but
for that.
but what you got?
Next up, we have one from Plumakin who
Oh,
says,
Plamokin. Hey, yeah,
yeah,
longtime friend of the channel.
my hot take is that you and Dev are the best Magic content creators. Well, this is a super hot take.
Yeah, I almost spit take. That would have been gold. I actually just should have gone ahead with it, but that
Yeah,
almost caused me to
this is a very hot take.
yeah,
And this isn't,
maybe.
and let me say, this isn't even about like imposter syndrome or whatever, nothing like that. Like, there just are a lot of really good content creators right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not trying to like dong ride too hard just because I'm on your channel right now, but like you're great. Like you might be legit like in that category. I'm far too lazy to be in that category. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
but you've put in
but
time to build an audience too.
that's true. And like when I do put a lot of work and effort and time into like the big videos that I release. But that said, I am not like, and I'm not just trying to be like self deferential or anything, but when it comes to like the vast scope of MTG content creation, I would say I'm not in the top like 8. And that's again, I'm not trying to
Oh
like
no, I
knock
feel
on
you.
myself.
Like,
Like
I
there are so many good creators, dude. Like I'm not Sam. Like I'm not Ristic Studies as much as
oh,
I would
dude, his
love to
videos are
be.
brilliant.
That's the thing is in for
But they're
every Sam,
month-long
there's like 3
projects
other
too.
people.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
exactly, exactly.
But I
But
also tell people, like, every time those threads come up on social media, and I'm included, where people go like, "Oh, like Power Dragon and the Professor are like my favorite." I'm like, "You know how big that valley is?"
yeah,
Like, a dude
I
was about to
feel
have 1,000,000 subscribers, and a guy who's got coming up on 30,000, right? Like, this is,
yeah. It's like it
like,
still means a lot to me when someone, because inevitably, like once a week, someone's like, who's your favorite content creator? And maybe 1 to 2 people on average will be like, oh, at SBMTG Dev's that guy, and it just makes me feel. It makes me feel 2 ways. It makes me feel incredibly lucky that I get to do this and that I
oh,
get to like
sure.
entertain people, and it means that much to them. But B, it also makes me think like, have you watched other? Have you tried? Did you stop it? Did you stop at me? Because there's other people.
The thing is, I've been very lucky to work with a lot of other creators and see their process and see what they do. But you have people like Covert Go Blue that has, I don't know, multiple channels and things he does now. Like,
Yeah.
MTG Nerd Girl might be one of the hardest working people in Magic,
Yeah, she does.
running multiple channels,
And I
streaming.
swear to God, she's always streaming.
She's
Like,
organizing stuff for these big conventions and command fests and like rounding up other creators and stuff. Like, hell, there's Veggie Wagon who does hilariously
oh yeah,
funny stuff,
veggies. Yeah, veggies, great, dude.
like
Yeah,
much funnier than I'll probably ever be.
yeah,
Right? Like,
yeah.
you know,
People say sometimes people seriously tell me that I'm the funniest content creator, and I'm like, Remy, you know what I mean? Like, what? There's like 8 people
dude,
I could name you right
the
now.
guys over at One More Mana, if you like just
Yeah, I've
Commander,
seen a few of their videos. Yeah,
those three
they're
dudes
good.
are hilarious, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
you have big productions like the dudes over at Game Nights, like they've
Yep.
got a pile of stuff. Like,
Mm.
there's a lot of good content out there. Like, so to
There's a
say
lot
that,
of great commander content out right there
mhm.
right now. I think a lot of people think it's just game nights and shuffle up and play, but there are a lot of YouTubers right now putting out a ton of great, specifically commander
Oh
content.
yeah, hell,
So.
Olivia and Brian's thing, Commander at Home is
Oh
great.
yeah, Commander at Home. Yeah, yeah.
There's
That's
really good too.
Yeah, I actually just saw my first episode of that like a
Yeah,
couple of
their
days ago. The
production's
newest video they
fantastic.
released. It's gorgeous. Yeah. So,
So yeah, I mean,
you
I
know,
appreciate it. Like, everybody's gonna be somebody's cup of tea or not or whatever. And some people are gonna latch on to certain creators more than others. So like, I tell people all the time, I am super appreciative that people feel that way about me, that they want to come watch my stuff that I'm putting out literally every day. Like, that's really cool. And I'm glad I hit those right vibes for them. But
yeah.
like, I would put myself in one of the hardest working, but if we say it's like the best overall, I don't know if I could do that.
Yeah, honestly, I think I just get by on like being kind of chill.
You know what though?
I think that's
That's a thing.
basically it.
The number of people that tell me they enjoy that type of content is actually pretty impressive, because
Astronomical, dude. Yeah.
there's so many people I think that are over the top performative, that are just like loud or complaining all the time or
I
whatever,
think
even though
people are
that's not
so
their
tired
actual
of that on
personality when
YouTube.
you meet them in person. That's the thing
Mhm.
that gets me. but they're performing for the audience regularly. And then sometimes people are like, I just kind of want to watch a thing about a deck or a review on a thing that's not somebody just trying to oversell me on something. I
Yeah,
just want
people
to be
don't.
part of a good conversation.
People, we've had YouTube long enough to where people really don't want to feel like their content creators trying too hard, or
Yeah.
they're being like too fake as an entertainer or whatever. So I don't know. Like I got jokes and stuff, but like for the most part, I just try to like go out there and talk to you. You know what I mean?
All right. We've got this one from Mr. JMac 2000 says 2 cents. Most decks, theirs included, are built to achieve a specific strategy only and do not account enough for interactions, stacks, land destruction, that type of stuff. This lack of prep is the primary cause of hate toward counter magic, stacks, spells, land destruction.
That's where we're going with it. Okay.
I
Okay.
disagree.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
Like,
Go ahead.
it's not that I haven't planned for those things. It's that, and a lot of people, especially, not to insult anybody, but the lower level to casual level player,
Yeah.
generally these are the conversations I've had. It's just that those things are simply not fun because it takes away the ability to play Magic, right? And when I play 60 card Magic and I'm playing on the ladder or I'm preparing for a tournament, all bets are off. Everybody's doing what they got to do to win. They're bringing their best, most difficult thing to deal with. Cool. But that's not what I'm signing up to do when I play Commander, right? I don't play those types of Commander games. I don't play against those type of Commander decks. My groups are not into that. Like, not saying there's no interaction. We don't kill creatures and like we
Yeah.
still do, but nobody's making you pay like an extra 5 mana for every spell or playing 52 counter spells
For
in their
spells.
Commander
Yeah.
deck or whatever, right? That's just not what we're signing up to do. It's like it's not about not being prepared. It's about not wanting to prepare for them. There's a very different
Yeah.
thing.
I think it's pretty easy to kind of look at this as a Magic player. Myopically is not the right word. Kaleidoscopically is not the right word, but it is a bit of tunnel vision as a Magic player to think like, oh, it's because of you're not building your deck right. And honestly, it really comes down to more of a human level
Mm-hmm.
than that. I think just on a base level. Here's an example. Like 3 years ago, something like it was a while back now, but not too long ago. I was teaching one of Brittany's cousins to play Magic, and one of their complaints was a a what, and I've gone on to use this on stream when talking about counterspells and stuff. Why are there cards in this game? This game wants me to play cards. Why are there cards that do not allow me to play
Exactly.
my cards? And honestly, that stuck with me. That's stuck with me. Like what a very simple but good point. The other complaint that she had was that why does this creature cost 5 mana? But like every spell that removes creatures costs 2 mana. How is that fair? And like, how is that fair? How is it fair that I have to, at sorcery speed on my turn, devote 4 or 5 mana to a decent creature? And like, on my turn, my opponent gets to spend 2 mana to Doomblade it at instant speed. But interaction is an important part of the game. I'm not, and I think it's wrong to kind of blanket say like people just hate interaction. And no,
No,
I
no, no.
like the idea of interaction. But it's the kind of, we had this whole argument on Twitter about Voha a couple of weeks ago, where some people think Voha's too much for Commander, and some people think, and my opinion is included in this group, that this is actually what we have here is a 5 mana Commander that is playable. And the ward helps make it playable and actually get to your next turn where it can do the thing it's supposed to do. Because if you invest 5 mana in a creature, it really ought to do a thing and not just get blown away on your turn for 2 mana. So it's not necessarily that people aren't building their decks right. And yes, yeah, I'll give it to you. I think again, like you said, especially on the lower level, there are people who like maybe aren't building their decks correctly. But if you played more than 3 games of Magic, you know that interaction exists.
Yeah, I think
You
there's a
know,
there's a difference though, right? Like if you're playing things and your stuff's dying to somebody's like weird Rube Goldberg like pile of artifacts
yeah.
and whatever, or they drew some cards, did this fun thing, and dealt some extra damage to something or whatever. Like, all right, cool. I got to see cards do something to kill my thing, right?
Thank
As
you.
opposed
Yeah.
to I either just couldn't cast it or it just got countered or whatever, right? That's really the difference here. And
Yep.
this is a good example, though, of where we were talking about somebody playing somebody else's format wouldn't necessarily create that empathy because they get into the situation with the player who does like playing stack style decks That's
Yeah.
gonna be a terrible experience, and there's gonna be like Commander's stupid, right? You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yep.
Like,
I mean,
so
and we've
yeah.
all had decks, the first time you play against Death and Taxes, the first time you play against Stacks, the first time you play against a combo deck that wins on turn 3. You're like, oh, well, that's stupid. I hate this. You know what I mean? But as a Magic player, you have to understand that like every time you sit down at a table, you'll be sitting down against a different like archetype of deck. And like some decks you're good against, some decks you're not. And that's just how it
But
is. You
again,
know what I
like I
mean?
told people, if I'm playing a 60 card format, I understand that this is just the one-on-one, this is the what we're doing. I don't think everybody's signing up for that in a Commander setting. I'm gonna let you take the lead on this one because I kind of have some feelings on it. But
Okay.
this comes from Kyle C. Carson says Commander gets better the further in the background it is in the overall Magic ecosystem.
No sort of.
That's it. That's the whole tweet. That's what I was like. I
I would
really
like
though? Like,
yeah, expand upon that a little bit. I think that maybe if what they're saying is if Commander is the premier Magic format, that's bad because there's too many eyes on Commander. That actually shifts the Commander meta in a direction I don't like subjectively. Then I guess I get what they're saying, but again, I think I just need a lot more information.
that's the way I felt about it. Like, I don't
Yeah,
this feels like an incomplete take because
yeah.
and it's somewhat maybe related to even the last hot take is that because these when I see these types of statements, usually expanded out as part of a conversation, it's usually from somebody who's getting some type of the best word I have would be like a homogenized commander experience, right? They're
Yeah,
seeing a lot of the
yeah.
same commanders, they're seeing a lot of the same cards, and they think it's because, oh, well, this is everybody's talking about it, everybody's following the same creators or whatever. But that's usually just a small pool of players, or usually players you're playing against. Because there was not, I think it was this past year. Like I traveled to as many events as I could, for Command Fest, Magic Cons, small conventions, local stores, whatever. And I wasn't even seeing the same commanders played at, and sometimes when I did see another
Oh
commander,
yeah,
they were built differently.
yeah.
So
It's
cards that people were saying like, "Oh, this is played everywhere and this is a problem." And we would go back to the commander advisor group and we'd talk about, "Hey, what did you see this weekend or whatever?" And we're like, "Oh, I only saw that card even played in like 3 decks."
right.
And like, "I didn't see it in any. I saw it in 1 deck." And it's like, "Okay, well, is it really that much of a problem? Or is it just 1 or 2 small pockets of players and the people on social media highlighting it, making it seem bigger than it is?"
Yeah, Commander is a weird format in some ways because I think that A, it is simultaneously like the least homogenous format in all of Magic, while B, sometimes feeling like the most. Because Cash Commander is in some ways just like advanced kitchen table magic, like kitchen table magic with a set of rules. And so I think often Commander for some playgroups, especially in smaller towns with smaller playgroups and fewer, LGSs and stuff, can feel like very stale and homogenous. Like everyone's doing this all the time because they don't really experience other playgroups. Whereas, like, someone that gets to travel, and see more sort
Oh,
of
yeah.
different commander tables will see a lot of different cards. So I think that Commander is still one of the very, very few formats in Magic that is largely dependent on what cards you physically own or have proxied or whatever.
Oh, well, dude, the number of people, even with something like EDH Rec and all this other stuff existing, still find cards because they're highlighted on a commander podcast or on
Yeah.
somebody's YouTube channel or whatever. So maybe they're getting exposed to things from the same things you are. Or again, you're right. If you're in a small pool of players, if somebody has a really hot commander or 2 or 3 cards are really doing damage in their games, well, then other people are going to start playing them because, like, oh,
Right.
this is the good
Right.
card. This is the hot thing to play.
And then it feels like, well, this is taken over and this is all Commander
But
is
if
everywhere.
you
And
drive 30, 45 minutes to go play at another local game store, their meta is gonna look way different.
yeah, different
Yeah.
people. That's the thing about Commander too, is like most playgroups, even if, they have somehow stumbled upon the completely optimal Commander deck, a lot of Commander players still have like literally 20 plus Commander
Oh,
decks.
sure.
So, like everyone, the thing about like Commander is usually if your playgroup gets a little boring or stale, like it fixes itself because somebody just built a different deck. You know what I mean? But that's not true for everybody. This is another take where I feel like, it really, it's very subjective.
Yeah.
And that's really all there is to it,
Yeah, I think it's just more of a lukewarm take. Feels
Yeah.
more like maybe somebody's just not having the best experience they think, and they probably think it's because Commander gets a lot of attention. But
Yeah.
outside of
Yeah, and
that, I don't know.
yeah, just you kind of alluded to this, but I'll just kind of piggyback on what you said. Like it's a very kind of like social media driven take. You
Mhm.
know, I think like I'm not saying this person like doesn't play any commander in the real world. I'm sure they do. They probably play more than I do, but at the same time I think it is like a take informed by, Twitter talk. What you got next?
All right, next up comes from Mark underscore confidant. So I see what you did
Ah,
there.
it's cute. Yeah.
The group of wizards that people don't complain at nearly enough are the editors. Bad templating makes many relevant cards wordier or more confusing than they need to be. Well,
They're
one, I
working
don't
on
think
it.
you need to be angry at anybody. Like directing
Agreed.
anger at
Yeah.
somebody doing their job is just silly.
Yeah.
So let's I know it's what they didn't mean it that way, but it's like we don't need to be
Right. It's like
complaining
I
at
don't
people.
particularly like when people put any anger towards like the
Yeah,
designers
people
or
just doing their job.
you
But
do it exactly.
the templating being wordy is a tough thing, and I can tell you from having been there, worked with some guys at R&D when we've helped like add ideas or context to cards. It's largely because Magic has a very specific language to make it
It's a
work.
language. It is a
That's
language,
that's the
right?
problem, right? We can't just say a card does ABC because it's like, well, what if there's this other thing on the stack, or what happens if this thing dies in the middle of it resolving, or whatever, right? So we have to have that extra sentence that says, then do this thing, or
Right.
if
Or
this
else,
happens, this is a thing,
like if you
or
don't do that, it might
choose
not work within the rule set of the game.
yeah, or choose target one, two, or three things versus choose one, two, or three things, or whatever, right? That all matters in how things work. And unfortunately, it does lead to some cards being wordier.
A little wordy, but they're probably better for that. And I've had this
Mhm.
conversation a couple of times with people, and I always say that if you think like templating is an issue or it's confusing or too wordy, try designing like 10 magic cards. Because eventually you will ask yourself, like, how's the templating work on this? And it's not because, like, oh, I want to make sure I word it exactly how they would word it for authenticity. No, it's because, like, it needs to be worded a certain way to work.
Well, a lot of times I
Like,
tell people
you
the
know?
cards that they think are too wordy, it's okay, what would you take off of this card?
Yep. Yep.
You know?
And then, how would that affect what sort of butterfly effect would that have?
Yeah.
if you did take
And
that
I
like
think that's
one
the tough
phrase out.
part. Like, and we're also in a world too where if you want cards to keep doing more fun and interesting things, unfortunately, the language they're built on, right,
Yep.
says things have to be worded a very specific way, or we can't get this crazy cool outcome that we want.
Yeah.
Now, to their credit, we're taking off some words. We've turned enter the battlefield and it just enters or whatever,
Enters. Yeah.
so we can
I
get
think
a
that's a good
little more
change.
room, which is
A
cool.
converted mana cost is mana value, which I think
Yeah,
is just a much better phrase and it's shorter.
yeah. So I'm with all that. They are aware of it. They're trying to work on it, but yeah, I don't think anybody really needs to be yelled at or
Like yeah,
complained
you don't
at.
need to be angry with
Yeah,
anybody.
I
I don't know
mean,
about that.
some cards
And
are
like,
wordy.
they are trying.
Yeah,
They're trying.
but
You know.
that's part of playing a game. Like I've played board games where I have to reread a page of the rules 4 or 5 times because things have to work a specific way for this game to function, right? Like,
Yeah.
eh, is it annoying sometimes? Sure, but that's not something I'm gonna go like, how dare they? Like it's just
It's like on a similar tip, I see a lot of people getting upset with the phrase, do this, this only happens once each turn. Once each turn. People get really mad at that. And like I'm part of the problem because like I've seen a few cards during previous season and been like, oh, I wish this wasn't once a turn. But I think that people and once a turn is just one example of
yeah.
this. But I think people sometimes miss that if a card didn't say once each turn, then it would be super
Oh,
breakable,
there's
infinite
multiples that
combo.
if they didn't say that,
Yeah,
I'd go ham.
exactly. Everyone would. Like it would be one of the most like there are cards like that that if they didn't say you do this only once each turn, it would be like a modern staple. Like it would be over for modern if these cards didn't say. So
Yeah,
they have to be very careful and the designers and templators and editors, they're all very aware of sort of how they have to design cards in order for them to not break magic.
I think
And
you bring up a
sometimes
good
that
point there.
involves certain phraseology. So
Yeah, I think that's actually the best point is that sometimes those extra words are to keep a thing from being busted,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
And there's just nothing you can do about that. All right, our next one up comes from OK I Scoop, which has
Oh,
come
Okie.
across my streams that I just
Woo.
call Okie Scoop, which is fun.
Same. Yeah. This dude. By the way, what's up, Okie? This guy has been on my streams like the whole time I've been streaming, and I called him Okie Scoop for like 2 years before I really realized like your name is Okay I Scoop. but like I still call him
Oh, I
Oki. So
realize it. It's just more fun to say Okie Scoop.
same. Like I finally realized it. I don't care. His name is Oki. He's okay with that.
All right. Their take is standard should always be the Pro Tour RC and RCQ format. This is a pretty hot take, but I'm like 80% on it. Like, here's what I would say. I don't think we need to ignore the other 60 card formats. I think
Yeah,
they
that's my
should get
issue.
featured, especially if we're talking about like Modern Pioneer, right?
Pioneer.
But if we're gonna have 4, I would say 1 and 3 should be standard seasons. Make 2 Pioneer, make 3 Modern. Because standard really does move a lot of product, which is important, obviously, whether we like it or not, important to capitalism, bottom line.
It's a thing we have to think about.
But it's also
Drive the
the
sales.
easiest point for a lot of people to jump onto.
That's
When you're
true.
talking about fewest cards, fewest
I mean,
rules you have
those
to
are
learn.
both points that Wizards themselves have made in
Yeah,
the past.
and I think
So yeah,
that would be good to say, all right, people should be aware and have a standard deck available because especially now that you can keep your standard deck for 3 years or whatever, or most of it, because there'll be a rotation.
yeah.
But having those for at least 6 months out of the year for the competitive levels, for the pro tour, at least 2 pro tours, like highlighting it, whatever, I think would be a very good thing.
I am attempting. It's very important to me to remain objective.
Sure.
And I am a standard guy. It's my favorite format. It's more or less the only format I play outside of some cubing, a little bit of pauper here and there. All my other formats are here or there formats. Standard is like the format I play for like 12 plus hours a week.
Same.
So, I got 2 wolves in me. And like one of these wolves is like, standard's the best format anyway, dude. Like it should be standard. And like some of that is not just because I like standard, it's for some of the reasons you've already stated. But like the other wolf is like, you kind of like standard too much to be trusted with this take. So I don't know. You could make an argument that if they wanted to get really funky with it, they do a standard season, modern season, and then they do some sort of roulette where you might get pauper, you might get 96, 97. Who knows? You might get CEDH or something. I would like to see. Here's what I'd like. And I know that this again is like complete polar opposites, but I would like for like either, like you said, like 3 out of 4 events per year to be standard, or to go really kooky and like feature formats that don't usually get featured at least once a year. So you do like modern, pioneer, standard, and then that 4 slot is taken up by something sort of off kilter.
See, I think some of the what we'll call eternal formats won't ever be featured because it's just they don't contribute to the bottom line enough.
You can't do like a vintage, like when a
Yeah.
brand new standard legal set comes out.
Well, yeah,
You
but I'm
can't,
saying,
Pro Tour's vintage,
but even
it's
like Popper or like we're saying Canadian Highlander, any of that stuff, like can't ever be a thing because it just
yeah.
there's just not a need to go buy new cards or they can't make products to support those formats effectively. It's kind of the issue.
That's true. I was about to be like Secret Lair, only good commons, but they probably already done that.
Yeah, they haven't, but that'd be a good package.
I should do it, Wizards, but
yeah, I
yeah.
don't think every competitive thing should be standard, but I think no less than 50% should be.
Yeah, I'll agree with you on that. I'll 100% agree with you. I do think that standard should be the flagship format, and
Yeah.
Wizards still calls it the flagship format, but until this year, they hadn't really acted like it in a while.
Yeah,
I
and
do like
honestly,
some of the changes that we are seeing.
they are doing some sweet stuff coming down the pipe with like the Cowboy Bebop promos or whatever. I don't know if you saw those.
Yeah, that was sick. Yeah,
Those are going to start rolling out in August, I think.
People get so mad about those. Like a certain segment of the community gets so mad about that. I think we should be doing more stuff like that.
Oh yeah. Those are
like
coming.
As much stuff like that as possible.
Now, the promos they made for this most recent round of standard championships or store championships, I think it is, like those were not standard legal cards, and that was a letdown. But
It's a little weird, yeah.
But I think those, because of timing of things and art being, commissioned or whatever, those were probably made at like before the decision was made to move everything that we have to reinvigorate standard. Right.
Yeah.
So I think that's the case, which is why we're starting to see the Cowboy Bebop stuff and whatever. They're going to be rolling out later. But they did commit to sending stores like the oversized cards and like all kinds of cool stuff you can win as prizes. So really, if people aren't playing standard, you should go play some because the crowd aren't that big right now and the prizes are really valuable.
And they're everywhere. That's the thing is it's not just like prize support at your local game store and obviously support your LGS, but at the same time, there are a lot more like big tournaments being held at convention centers for standard than there have been in the last since COVID, really.
There's different groups running
It's
standard tournaments online with Arena even.
yeah, with
You
Arena,
know?
there's a lot of groups. Hollywood Pizza hosts an
I think
open just
Birds of
about
Paradise
every.
has one coming up soon,
Yeah,
their group.
Bob does one just about every month now
Yeah,
too.
so yeah, I'm with it.
What you got
All right,
next?
this next one comes from Finally64. It says they should not print cards for Commander and Standard sets. Oh boy,
Oh my
this
god,
this
we're
is
like an
weird.
hour.
I can't call this a hot take because I think there's some number of people who repeat slash regurgitate this statement.
I was gonna say this isn't a hot take because like I've never heard this one before. Like I
But
hear it every day.
and we did discuss this lightly in pre-show, a similar topic. But
Yes, a little.
my question every time I hear this, really, it's a twofold thing. The first is, why is it wrong for a card or two that you deem to be not good in standard to be okay in commander? Right? Like it's a bone or two to encourage somebody to pick up some singles, buy some packs, whatever.
Right.
But also, we have seen cards that have not done anything in standard that people immediately look at it and go, "Oh, well, this is obviously just a commander card." But then the thing that works with it comes out 9 months later, right?
Right.
Or
You gotta
cases
work for it.
where
Wait for it.
people think it's a commander card, right? And then it ends up being a good standard card. Or even like Modern Horizons, which isn't a standard set, mind you, but I remember Modern Horizons 1, Modern Horizons 2, people are like, oh, these are just a bunch of commander cards. But then
They're
what did
still
we hear?
saying it
That set ruined Modern because too many cards got played in Modern and changed
in
all the decks,
modern.
right?
Yep.
So what are we
Yep.
even saying when we make these
People
statements?
still say that about Modern Horizons. That's a whole other take right there. It put too many cards into Modern is wild.
But
That's a
again, remember,
wild
when
opinion to
it
me.
first came out,
Like,
though, everybody was saying, oh, well, these cards aren't going to be that good. They're not going to change. They're mostly going to be commander cards. I don't know why they're printing these. And then they dominated the format, right?
yep. People say it about standard releases. People said it about OTJ. People said it about Murders at Karlov Manor, right? Like this is just commander cards. And then both of those sets had a tangible effect on the standard meta.
Yeah.
And there we how do I want to put this? I don't want to say like Magic players can generally be this because I don't think any group of people are generally that's very essentialist language, right? But with a group of players as big as Magic, like they say it's like 20 million people, you're going to have people with these sort of myopic views. And I think that this is like one of the worst because it just basically they didn't say this. And I don't like when people like extrapolate language or whatever, but I will say this sounds like the only cards that should be printed in standard sets, standard cards. And if that is what the take is generally, then I don't agree with that either.
To that point, let me kind of change the narrative a little bit here on this statement. Let's change the word commander, that they should not print cards for commander and standard sets, to legacy or
You
modern
should not print
or
let right,
vintage, right?
right. And then how
That's
does that?
always been a thing though, right? Like there's
Yep,
always some card,
yep.
no matter how it's designed, that does almost nothing in standard, but is the card. Like, this card removes things from the graveyard or whatever. But we're like, okay, that doesn't do anything standard, but it's the best sideboard card against life from the loam decks or whatever,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, it's
Dredge decks.
incredible in modern, right?
Right.
And
So
that
it's
happens kind of a lot. So, and I think I brought this up like pre-show, but like let's say that there's a commander card or two or three, and I know that people that make this point would probably counter by saying like every rare is a commander rare. No, they're not. But let's say that like half the set is commander rares, and there's a few rares in there that end up being like $10 because they're good in commander. Okay, they're in your standard set. Now, if you open them, you can sell them for store credit or you can trade them to a person for a card you actually want. It's like those cards the commander cards have value, and you can use that value to get cards you
yeah, it
actually
adds
want.
value to the overall the break
The
rate of the
pool.
set for sure.
And like you've kind of already pointed this out, but it's just like when it comes to Magic may be, 20 million or whatever players strong, but there's different shares of the market in those 20 million people. There's some commander players, some standard players, some modern players, some pauper players, some whatever. And I don't think it's unreasonable for someone to want to buy a standard set and get something for their format of choice, even if that format isn't standard, you
I
know?
would also,
Well,
and this is the other thing I've asked people is, what does that look like to you? Like, how do you design a set where not a single card has value to some chunk of the commander populace? Right? Does
if
that mean we
anything,
can't make ramp cards? We can't make any mana artifacts that are
No
cheap.
sweepers. Yeah, no good rocks.
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I don't know 100 like
No global effects of any
yeah, I'm
kind.
just
You know,
and I'm
nothing
not
that
trying
says
to be
each player.
yeah, I'm not trying to be, kind of over the top here or whatever, but like what are we trying to say, right? Is it just a card that only has a chance of being playable in Commander and no chance at all in Standard? And if so, how many of those do we really say exist right now?
Yeah.
Like the only one that
And like,
stands out immediately is like Obeka, I think, because with the upkeep
yeah.
triggers or whatever that you can copy. But even then, there might be something in Bloomborough or whatever the next couple of sets that we go like, oh, Becca's about to be sweet, you know.
Yeah. It
Actually, good
could be.
example. Remember when Hanada had a minute
Yeah.
right in
Yeah.
Standard, and that
Yep.
was like a big deal. But for a while, nobody touched the card,
Yeah.
right?
And
Like,
it's yeah, it's still really cheap nowadays because like cards go through crests and valleys.
yeah,
And it's not necessarily about people forget that like cards are good dependent on the meta. And it's not like sometimes you can look at a card and be like, well, that text box doesn't look very good. But it turns out that in the context of the meta, it's an incredible magic card.
maybe I was just like just thinking through my position, and I think it's more of like some level of cynicism there because of hearing the number of people going like, "Oh, well, Wizards printing too many commander cards, or they're doing this thing." And I think this is sort of where this falls of just like, well, I see cards that I think are commander cards, and I don't want those in my standard sets. It's sort
Yeah.
of what this
It's kind
feels
of a
like.
knee jerk. It feels
Yeah,
reactionary.
but like I
Yeah.
said, right now I'm thinking like, how many cards even in Thunder Junction would I say are truly, if I look at them and go, this is only a commander card?
Strictly commander.
A
And even
couple,
then, like, even if
maybe.
there are, you know,
Yeah,
like
and that's what I'm saying.
Gireth or
But
however you
even
pronounce
Gareth,
his
I
name.
just played in the deck in standard. It was
Yeah, I was gonna
sweet.
say
I copied a
there's
million
an
things and did some awesome
there's
stuff.
an infinite combo right now in standard with Gireth and Dominating
But that's
Vampire.
the type of card
Like,
people look and go, oh, well, this is obviously made to be a commander. And
yeah,
it's
so
like,
they just
well,
don't
can it
bother with
be?
it. They just
Yes.
write it off, you
But
know?
like, you can do some sweet stuff in standard with it too.
I understand where you're coming from. I
Exactly.
get it. I
Exactly.
really do. I just at the end when you really like analyze all the reasons it has to be the way it is, and you can be cynical if you want to, but look, like you can call this a cynical take, but it just makes sense from a business perspective. And whether you like it or not, Commander is in paper at least
But
the
again,
most played, most popular format. So of course they want to sell cards for Commander players.
but I will say, when I've
Like,
challenged people and I say, okay, how many of these cards do you think are only commander that showed up in your set? And it's not that many.
again, there have to be levels to it. And there has to be like, oh, we'll give this piece to modern players. We'll reprint fetch lands in standard for modern players. But we'll also give commander players what they want. We'll give the standard players what they want. It's not like what 20
Here,
cards in OTJ affected standard. How much affection do
I think
you
here's where I'll
want?
wrap this up.
Or how much effect do you want?
Is that is it really a problem if standard has been as good as it has been for the last 9 months?
I keep trying to say that.
Like
You know,
I think that's it, right? We're talking about a thing. I think this is why I'm going to say this. This is a bad hot take. Is that it's not a problem.
it isn't.
You know what I mean? Like
Standard has like 15 playable decks.
this is the best.
Like
The last 6 months have been the best standard's probably been in ages. And
since like original Innistrad, maybe since like Lorwyn, and like even
yeah,
Lorwyn
and I
standard
would even
wasn't
say
that
the
good.
previous 6 months weren't even bad, but it's just been really particularly good the most recent 6 months.
At least Cons was probably the best standard I can remember in a very long time. Really, Cons Fate Reforged, and that was 8 years ago. And again, that's a subjective opinion too, but I don't remember standard being this good since at least like years before
Hell,
COVID.
I would say right now,
So,
standard, you can even play a quality monocolored deck of every color right now. And that's a thing we haven't even been able to say in ages.
oh, well, you can.
Yeah, I was just thinking
Yeah,
about that. Like almost every two color combination has some reasonable deck I've run into on the ladder at some
something.
point,
Yeah.
right? Like, yeah, I think that's it. This is definitely a bad because it's not affecting anything. I think that's my
Well, like,
problem.
you can still not only can you still play standard, but standard is stronger than it's been in forever. So
Yep.
you literally can have your cake and eat it too on this one. Like
Cheap
there can
decks,
be commander
expensive
cards in your
decks, like
yeah.
aggro decks, control, combo, doesn't matter. They all
Yep.
exist in standard right now. This last one comes from Titan Smash MTG, who used to do a bunch of content. So thanks
Mm.
for this. But he says, I don't think it's a hot take, but there should be more paper and arena synergy. Pre-release kit codes are great, but doing a similar path for regular packs would be great.
Yeah.
Give me a code that I can redeem for even an uncommon with a chance at being a rare. Doesn't have to be huge.
Yeah. I'm sorry to take the reins. I'm gonna give it right back over
Yeah,
to
go
you.
for
But I'm
it.
just gonna let you know that this is the take I agree with the most in the whole thing. Yeah.
I agree with it, but probably in a way a lot of other people don't. And what I mean by that is like I do think they could be tied together a lot better. And we've seen some small things where Wizards is like dabbled of like, hey, play 3 events in your local store, get this thing. I think right now it's like play 3 drafts in your store, get a free draft token on Arena, something like that. There needs to be more things to drive people from digital to the paper side.
Exactly.
That's
Yeah.
that's the problem.
Yes.
Like
I
everybody's
feel
talking
like
about, oh well, I should get a code so it makes it easier for me to get a thing on Arena. It's like, okay, well,
yeah.
kind of, but the real issue is, can we do something where like, hey, play, I don't know, the standard challenge and get 5 whatever wins in a row and get a code to take to a local store and get a thing. Like, I
Yeah,
don't
they'd
know.
have to do it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like I've heard a lot of people with these are good suggestions. I don't
Mhm.
want to sound like I'm saying they're bad, but basically they want, the arena economy to be a lot more like the Pokemon economy, where like I buy a pack of real life magic cards and I get a code to buy a pack of fake magic cards on arena.
Mhm.
And I do think that like codes for packs in boosters would be like one step they could take. But you've hit on the problem. That's all paper to arena. And they really need to focus on the other side. From a business perspective, you need to get people off arena and into paper.
We need to put some more thought into that, cuz I don't think it's necessarily like you have to get people off of Arena. Realistically, there can be more synergy between paper and digital, but I think it's more about you have to throw the retailers a bone effectively if you want them to play the game. Right? If everything they're
Yeah.
getting is like, "Oh, well, I do this thing," it's awesome you're getting them to come do this thing, but it's to eventually just send them to Arena. But, I think even coming back to the original point, I think it's how do you just make things interesting for both sides, right? Like, what is an interesting thing on Arena that appeals to card players? But then what's also an interesting thing to an Arena player that you can get them to go into a card store,
And this is
right?
something that like they'd have to sit and brainstorm on. And I'm sure they have. I'm sure that there's, a whole task force at Wizards designed.
Sure.
We got to get people on arena to convert to paper. And I guarantee, again, they have the data and they want to get that number up. But just like I don't have a whole lot of like concrete suggestions because it is much harder to get people to come off the digital client and go to paper.
Yeah, to me, now there was a thing that I think people, well, actually, it's long enough now. Most people won't ever know about this, but there was a time when the original Titans came out, like the Primeval Titan, Grave Titan, whatever.
Yeah.
And I think it was Primeval Titan, Grave Titan, and Inferno Titan, maybe. Or no, maybe it was Inferno Titan, Grave Titan, and the white one, Sun Titan.
Sun Titan.
They were
Yeah.
tied to what was the arena?
Duels of the, Duels of the
Yeah, there you go,
Planeswalkers?
Duels of the Planeswalkers,
Yeah,
and it was.
2014 Duels of the
But
Planeswalkers.
each
Yeah.
system that you played on gave you a different type of code. So you would come bring that code to the local store and you could
Yeah.
get one of those Titans or whatever. And then I think
Yeah, I
the
did.
next
I
year they
actually,
did it. I
yeah.
think it was like a 3 card booster pack or something or whatever. They had a different
Yeah.
thing the next year. But something like that could possibly work. And they have systems where that exists. Now,
Yeah.
again, you have it be a one-time thing. It can be scannable at the store, whatever the case is, right? You can make a system that works, or they could put the code in online to make sure the code hadn't been used before or whatever before they give the thing. Like there'd be a bunch of ways you could verify it. But even that would be like, okay, cool. If you do these 2 or 3 things on Arena, maybe you play through the color challenge to like the beginner stuff, and you play one draft, and you play one like, I don't know, standard challenge or something. Cool. You go in, you get this pack that's got like 3 sweet cards in it. You print off this code, you take it to a local store, boom, and then the local store doesn't even have to be out anything, right? They just get sent the promos and they have them. And then somebody shows up, you give them a thing for the sheet, right?
Right. It's the same way like pre-release promos and stuff work. So we just got a box full of them here.
Yeah, hell, it doesn't have to,
If,
you
if
could,
people come
matter
in.
of fact, you could have it set up where the mobile app on Arena just pops up a code or something and they can just scan
Yeah.
that, right? It could be anything.
Yeah.
There's a bunch
A
of ways you
QR
could do
code
it.
or something like that. QR code would be a good idea.
Yeah.
It's
Or
like
in your
even
what's it, Magic Companion app, right? You could do it through that.
yeah.
with all that being said, with all these hot takes, I don't think we agreed with a lot of them.
No, there's a couple where you're
Yeah,
like, okay, I'll give you half of that one, 20% of that one,
for
all
sure.
that.
But I don't know. I think there's a lot. I don't think, like I said, only one or two I think were actually wrong. But
Yeah.
I get where they're coming from. There's a lot of personal perspective, a lot of investment, and I think we always have to remember that hot takes come from a position of people being enthusiastic about the things they're into, right?
Enthusiastic's a word choice. I feel like a lot of the ones we disagree with the most had like a couple of thick layers of salt on top of them. And I just feel like, whenever you see a hot take that's like 80% salt, like that was a person that'll probably feel different in the morning. You know what I
Quite
mean? Like
possibly.
you
Quite
get a
possibly.
little perspective on it, they're too close to it right now. So I don't know. I feel like any take that's like purposefully or not even purposefully, but just hyperbolic,
Yeah.
you know?
As I always have to ask, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button for this great conversation we gave you, but also let us know your hot takes. We might use them in the next video. So if you want to
Yeah,
be
I'd love
heard,
to do this
you want to hear
again.
us talk about some stuff you're into, go ahead and let us know in some comments. I'm sure y'all are going to like this thing. Or if you really disagree with some of our takes, that's also interesting too. Let us know.
Yeah,
On
they
the other side of that, Dev, why don't you tell them about your channel and where to find you?
All right, man. I'm from Strictly Better MTG, but that sounds really pretentious. So we mostly just shorten it to SBMTG. And if you put those 5 letters into your YouTube search bar, I will pop up. Aside from that, we mostly do like deck techs, top tens, and we're mostly known for like preview videos, but we do a little bit of everything gameplay, hot takes of our own. So, come on over to the channel, see how you like it. If you liked Quan, then we have a similar, I think, energy level for the most part. So, you know, come check out the content, man. But if you're from my channel, if I'm just gonna throw this right back at you, if you're from my channel, and I told you this video was coming out, we'll go watch that video. Come stay. Well, you can click his channel icon right up under this video, and it takes you. I don't know if you knew this, to his channel with all of his videos he's ever uploaded, and he's got like a billion decks. So like, watch the Quan's channel.
Hey,
So,
the one thing I can promise you is amusing conversation and content literally every day. Like
yeah.
I can give you that. But yeah, as
You don't stop working.
I don't. But as
Man,
always, y'all take care of yourselves. Be kind to each other because that's the most important thing.
always.